Thank you very much, Simon, for your warm words of welcome. And I'd like to add my warm words of welcome to everyone as well. So, as Simon said, this afternoon we're delighted to be joined by the Commissioner Mariya Gabriel. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And we also have a fantastic panel of experts joining us as well. So the format for this discussion is that we'll first have 20 minutes Q&A with the Commissioner, followed by around 30 minutes of discussion with the panel on all the themes raised. Now, regarding those themes, this year we sent out an email to all our network members prior to the conference to ask them for their questions to pose to the Commissioner. And we were so delighted with the enthusiastic response. And I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who considered our request and put forward their very, very insightful and interesting questions. In fact, there were so many, almost hundreds, that we would actually be here all afternoon if we asked all of them. So instead, I've just synthesized them down into 4 key themes, and we were going to be thinking about those themes as we move forward today. And finally, I think before we just get started, I want just to say that for all of you out there in the audience, please feel free to use the event platform to send us your questions or your comments and your thinking around these areas, because it will just be very useful to get feedback on these areas as we're discussing them. Right, so now on to those 4 themes. Now, first of all, Commissioner, thank you so much again for joining us today. I guess you won't be surprised to hear the first theme, which is all around the timetable of implementation of Horizon Europe. Can you give us any further updates on when we can expect the programme to be running and crucially for when the money to be flowing? Because some of our network members are getting quite worried about cash flow issues and would just like a further update, please.
Thank you. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for me to be here together with you. Thank you very much, Science Business, for this important meeting for all of us. And thank you, Professor Cardew, for your first question. Of course, I think that's now the main question, because we all remember how during some months and 1 year, we really fought it in order to have the budget for the Horizon Europe program. And now I think that there is some great expectation. And of course, one of the first is what's about the implementation. And I would like to start by saying that the gap between programs will be very narrow, because the last call of Horizon 2020 closed on 27th of January, remember, with the Green Deal call. And by the way, we received more than 1,550 candidates, so huge interest. And as announced last week, as of next month, we'll already mobilize 120 million euros from Horizon Europe Cluster Health via an emergency procedure for actions related to COVID-19, but this time specially linked to new variants. So these actions will be the first under Horizon Europe, coming already in March. Next month, we'll also adopt the strategic plan, the work programs for ERC. Today there is an important announcement for them. Congratulations. The EIC and the Single Basic Act for Partnerships. So especially for Single Basic Act for Partnerships that will be adopted by the Commission tomorrow. So you can see that there is some very encouraging news. And allow me here to share with you some last information about partnerships, because the financial commitment received from member states amount already to 10.4 billion euros, which means that they would like really to make substantial contributions. And the commitment from industry to the 9 joint undertakings is up to 12.9 billion euros. In April, the main work program are planned, and around this time we plan to launch the 11 co-programmed European partnerships, including artificial intelligence, robotics, batteries, photonics. For our missions, there is a very clear agenda now. May, June, completion of our now mission implementation plans. In July, decision on which missions will begin the full implementation, and we plan to adopt our communication in July too. And in Q3, Q4, adoption of the revised work programs with calls for missions. So you can see that month by month, we are working with my team in order really to ensure that there will be no interruption, because It's for our researchers, it's for our organizations, it's for our innovators. So I think that with our team, we'll continue to do our best in order really to satisfy them, because now expectations are big, but we all know that thanks to our excellence, thanks to our experience, we can overcome these challenges.
That's perfect. Thank you so much for that update. That's very clear, and I'm sure that our network members and all the people in the space will be very, very relieved to hear you say that. The second group of questions that I have are around global challenges and international collaboration. So many people were talking about the fact that the traditional European strength has been kind of open to the world and a very kind of open agenda. But, you know, will the Horizon Europe have that same spirit of openness in the kind of more competitive geopolitical environment? So I know you've been talking a lot around open strategic autonomy, technology sovereignty. You know, how do those jigsaw pieces fit together?
Well, it's not an easy question, but I must say that international cooperation is essential to find solutions to many of the global challenges like climate change or even now health threats. So we need access to the best minds and facilities around the world, and we need our partners to implement these good solutions for those challenges. That's why Horizon Europe will remain open to international cooperation that help us to deliver, but at the same time, geopolitical changes are real and we should not be naive. Our last strategy for international cooperation on R&I dates back from 2012. For this reason, this year, I together with my team, will present a new strategy, adding education and youth elements, because we have to ensure that our values and our interests are protected, and we must seek reciprocity and level playing field. That's why I think that at least we have 4 reasons for this international cooperation and, if I may say, the modulation of our engagement if there is a need for that. First, we should target our cooperation on areas where it is both necessary for the science and where our values and strategic technological sovereignty are less at risk. Second, we should use the new power to limit cooperation on sensitive technologies. I'm thinking here about Article 22.5. We'll talk more and more about this in the Horizon Europe legal base. Third, we should better equip academics and researchers in Europe to deal with foreign interference in their work, and will issue guidelines in 2021. And finally, we should ensure that innovative platforms that are the foundations of our economy and much on our democratic systems are not dependent on decisions taken outside Europe. So I think that here the challenge is to preserve our international cooperation, our openness, but at the same time not to be naive and to stay very strategic. And that's why open strategic autonomy is a key element of the European resilience, and I don't see any contradiction. Allow me to give you here one example. The first work program of Horizon Europe will target international cooperation in about a quarter of all the calls. 222 relevant topics with a total budget of 3 billion. And of course, we have here very strong partners. Now, for me, the question is how to build alliances with global centers of excellence on issues such as climate change, technological development, health, and how we can create common standards together with our partners, respecting our own fundamental values and strengthening global governance. So you can see that here, for me, what is important is to continue to say European science has global impact because of its excellence. We need our international partners, but this time we have really to be sure that values, principles, that's not only simple words.
That's really very clear. Thank you. So in other words, you'll be developing more information and new strategies so the community can be hearing more from you as the year develops. Will there be any opportunity for more discussion from the community to be informed and to put forward their point of view to enhance that global cooperation spirit?
Absolutely, and that's always my plea. I very much welcome these reactions. I count on this experience because we have to pay attention when we talk about ERC. It's not like in some very sensitive issues in the industry. So I stay very open to this, and I very much count on your contribution.
Thank you. I think our audience will be very happy to see that. So now the next question, I think, is possibly related to this. It's in the context of the ERA and strengthening the ERA, but in terms of research careers, talent acquisition, how we retain and attract the best talent from around the world, but also homegrown talent. How can researchers be better supported throughout their careers?
Well, another difficult question, because it's a real challenge how to transform even these expressions, brain drain or retain. I don't want to retain. I want to offer them a choice to see Europe as their home. And that's why I think that now with European Research Area, at least we have some instruments in our hands to change, to have a more systematic change. I think that that's something important. For me, at least, there is 3 levels of this for this change. First, we need data. We need data about the flow of our researchers, about the conditions of their job, about their real needs and the real challenges that they are tackling every day. That's why I already announced that we would like to have a European observatory on research careers that will monitor and recommend measures to ensure balanced brain circulation. Being able to get information on the research trends and the mobility prospect will definitely allow us to have a better policy making and targeted actions. Second level for me, really to stay more focused on researchers themselves. That's why we have now our proposal with ERA Talent Platform, the successor of EURACCESS. This time we would like to broaden the scope toward assisting researchers and their families for smoother integration in the labor market or in the country where they are, and to see how we can do that in more simplified and more really important way for them. And when I talk about researchers, I would like again to raise the importance of inclusiveness. And I'm always saying that excellence and inclusiveness are the both side of the same coin, but we need to tackle this at different level. And that's why I would like to give here the example of something that is important for me. That's the intersectoral mobility. We need to ensure this link between the world of industry and the world of academia. Remember, in our European Research Area, we proposed a joint industrial roadmaps. I will be very glad here to see what will be the first topics that we'll choose together and how we can definitely make better the conditions for our researchers. And final point, we need synergies. If you would like really to be more effective when working for our researchers, these synergies, there is for me two concrete examples. ERA Hubs, because that's something important for us. ERA Hubs is expected exactly to provide this networking framework for knowledge ecosystem actor and to stimulate place-based innovation and upskilling, to see how we can motivate, how we can support better the intra-regional and inter-regional connectivity. Even for international cooperation here, we have things to do. And when we talk about synergies, another important point too is synergies between European Research Area and European Education Area. We have already one great example with the European University Alliances. What I'd like to see that will be not the only one. We need here to promote these synergies. And when we talk about synergies, the last points, now we have new possibilities with cohesion funds, with the next generation. So that will be for me one of the main challenges, how we can better involve our regions, for example, in order to allow our researchers to have better conditions of work, to have more possibilities, to see Europe as their home. And that's why this time we have our joint action plan with the Committee of the Regions, the first ever in the history of our two institutions. I definitely believe that at this moment, the challenge is that we have instruments in our hands, from the level of data to researchers and cooperation. But now it's really time to see how we can implement them.
That's great. That's really good. It's very heartening to see that you have got that focus as well on diversity and inclusion issues, because I think they're ever more important today when we talk about intersectoral diversity and inclusion. It's not just a question, I think, of just gender inclusion, but actually there's so many different factors now that are making the research career very attractive for many people, but maybe less attractive for others who maybe. So that's really interesting and good to hear that you talk about that in a very important way. So I'm finally going on to our next set of questions, and they're final sort of questions really, but very important. It's around COVID-19 and the lessons learned. There were a huge number of questions on this topic, and so I've sort of segmented them into very different sections. First of all, though, a very broad question for you. What do you think is the most important lessons learned from the COVID pandemic? So it's a very broad question, and I may drill down into some detail after that. But your reflections first, please.
Well, first of all, I agree with what was already said during the first few minutes before our discussion. Of course, the first is that science and education are essential to respond to global challenges. I would like really to raise again that if you'd like definitely to be more successful by tackling climate change, or to see how we can use in a more beneficial way the challenges with the digitalization, and if you'd like to have simply an inclusive society, we need to take into account the role of science and education. And I think that here one of the most notable success stories was the development of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. That was even not thinkable 1 year before. And so I think that we should use this momentum. And of course, here my main message is to our member states: please use Resilience and Recovery Facility and Next Generation in order to show us that the investments in science, in research, in innovation, in education are really strategic investment. Second, I think that definitely we should continue to be better prepared, and we need to anticipate. And that's why I gave already the example with the 150 additional investments from Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe, in order really to see what will be our answer to the emerging variants. Because for me, that's something very important. Now we decided to create this European clinical trials network, Accelerator, but we need to follow this very closely because it's linked to the HERA incubator. And we all think about incubator that will be the stage preparing HERA. And without science, research and innovation, I can't see how Europe will use this in order to affirm the leadership in this field. Third point, we need, and that was very, very clear during the crisis, we need targeted investments and we need flexibility, because we need targeted investments where there is an added value, but we need enough flexibility for each member state, for each region to benefit from it. And that's why we all have seen how, thanks to the flexibility of Horizon 2020, that was so quickly our reaction. First call launched in January 2020. So fourth element, we need openness. We need to be able to exchange data in real time. We need international cooperation. We need open science and open access so that we can move forward quickly together. And our COVID-19 data platform has already been used by more than 3 million researchers from 170 countries. And I think that that was a very, very good example. Finally, I think that we should preserve our holistic approach, health, science, industry working together. We need to integrate, to coordinate our efforts across the entire value chain. We need support from frontier research, passing by missions and partnerships, and going to breakthrough technologies and innovation. And I think that that's the real added value of the new Horizon Europe program, because you can see what I'm saying is exactly the 3 main pillars of Horizon Europe. And finally, I think that we need to speak with one voice, because we all have seen how during the difficult last one year, we mobilized all our communities, not only talking about the importance of the budget of Horizon Europe, by talking about the importance of our talents, the importance of our experience, the importance of our European leadership based on values and principles. So I think that it will be very, very important here to stay together and to try really to overcome the different challenges. Because allow me here to use a metaphor, because I don't know if that will be appropriate, but for me, Horizon Europe program, it's not a solo performance. If you allow me this metaphor, with Horizon Europe and the new European Research Area framework, we have the stages and the music partition. And now starts the time for singers, musicians to get on those stages and perform. And that's my profound conviction, that we have the best musicians and the best singers. And we are able this time really to show to the entire world that we have traditions, but we are definitely those that can shape the future.
That's a lovely analogy there. It's just reminded me, and I've been thinking about the way in which we communicate this story to the general public. And I just wondered if you have any sort of personal reflections on how the scientific community and the policy communities and the industrial communities have managed to capture the public imagination in terms of the vaccine development, but also communicated the importance of measures that they can do to minimize the COVID pandemic too. Do you think there are any lessons learned there with how we communicate the science to the general public?
Well, I think that it's not an easy question, because we know the strength of our researchers, and we know that they stay all very modest because they are working. But at the same time, if we all make an effort to communicate in simple words, to communicate regularly, to be conscious of the impact of science and research, but to communicate this impact on a regular basis with our citizens, we have more chances to succeed. And that's what I already have seen during this crisis. And that's what I would like to continue to see in the new elements of our Horizon Europe program. I'm thinking here spontaneously about our missions, because health, climate change, digitalization, that's our 5 missions. And the citizens' involvement is one of the main questions here, because if citizens don't appropriate themselves these programs, these instruments, these achievements of the science, that will be definitely more difficult for us to convince them that this investment in science is a strategic one. But I think that this time we are in a different stage. Now the raising awareness is here. We need to show the impact, the benefits, and to continue the process of co-creation and co-design. Our citizens started really to be involved, and we should maintain this motion, the tempo, if I could come back to my metaphor.
That is really very interesting. I completely agree with you. It's very difficult to talk about the COVID-19 pandemic as an opportunity, but in some senses it has really revolutionized, I think, the way in which we co-create with citizens and communicate with the citizens, because it's very transparent, I think, that everybody's in this together, right? The citizens, the researchers, the policymakers. It's such tremendous, almost once in a lifetime, we hope, opportunity and terrible situation, but it's also transformed our way we talk to the public. So I think we're more or less out of time now. So thank you once again for coming here this afternoon and sharing all your thoughtful ideas and your optimism and your vision for the future. So Commissioner, thank you very much. We're going to now transition into the rest of our panel discussions, and I hope that the panel are ready now to give us their immediate reflections, maybe on some of the themes that we have raised. So first of all, I'll introduce everybody so that you know exactly who they are, and then we're trying to have more of a kind of conversational style discussion now. So first of all, we have delighted to introduce Karen Max, who is the Rector Magnificus of the University of Amsterdam. So welcome, Karen. And we have Matthias Rauch, who is the Director of Research, Strategy and Policy at the Fraunhofer. So welcome, Matthias. And we have Ronen Robinoff, who is the Global Head of Translational Medicine, Discovery and Profiling at the Novartis Institute for Biomedical Research. So once again, thank you everyone for coming along today and sharing your thoughts with us. First of all, any immediate reactions, anything that struck you from the first 20 minutes of this session straight away that you'd like to share with us? Feel free to interject. And anybody want to raise your hand and just start the discussion flowing? Karen, over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Commissioner Gabriel. This was a fantastic introduction to the program. I'm very happy and that top research is still on the top of the list. Young researchers and mobility is on the list. Innovation, as you explained, and also the societal challenges. And indeed, there's a lot of change needed in universities to go into this different type of doing research, at least in some areas, to be really more systemic. And that requires completely new fundamental and new applied research. This is one thing. Another thing that I don't know whether I can already ask a question or bring something in. On the other hand, for universities, there's also a big attention for infrastructure in this program, but there is one infrastructure which is not really named, and that is the digital infrastructure, for which Europe is not really ahead of other continents. And this digital infrastructure, as we have seen now in the COVID period, and it will only accelerate, will be the library of knowledge, it will be the research infrastructure, it will be also the platform for education, and it will be our publishing medium. And I'm very worried that maybe as Europe, we should do something about that, because this is one of the really most needed infrastructures to keep the whole education, research and innovation in our hands.
Commissioner, would you like to just maybe respond to that briefly, and then we can move the discussion on, if that's...
Well, do you hear me? It's okay. Very briefly, I fully share how important is this, and that's why I mentioned how important it is to build synergies between the European research area and the European education area. Because for me, the spontaneous example is our European University Alliances. 60% of them already started to share online materials, to build common platforms, and we all have seen that that's something very, very positive. Of course, we should preserve in our first pillar the world-class infrastructures, but this time with digital elements that are key. And that's why that will be definitely one of the questions that we would like to tackle, passing by some challenges and difficulties, because we talk about interoperability, we talk about protection of data, we talk really about serious things. At the same time, I think that definitely here we have to use the momentum, because we have investments for this. Remember, in the Resilience and Recovery Facility, 20% should be dedicated to these digital challenges, to the digitalization. So what I'm trying now to do is to convince our member states, when they are elaborating their national plans for research and innovation, always to take into consideration the necessity of digital infrastructures, of the interoperability, and how their talents can be better connected to the others. But of course, here we need to do something more. Another element on which I count very much is about these joint industrial roadmaps between academia and business, because the industry has already some of the solutions, but these solutions are not accessible to our universities, to some of our research institutions. And that will be definitely one of the questions that I will raise with them when we'll fix the two first topics on which we'll work together.
Thank you. So I'd like to bring in Matthias now to ask you for your comments on the talent and diversity issue. Would you like to just share with us some of your comments and ideas on that issue?
My pleasure indeed, Gail. And first, a short word of thanks to the organizers, but first and foremost to Commissioner Gabriel, having pointed out that truly one of the most important pillars is to build and rebuild cooperation and cohesion among the Europeans and the European communities. And I think the issue of education and training really is imperative. It's a decisive factor in strengthening not only our processes and our supply chains, but in strengthening European collaboration in general. Corresponding opportunities and career paths are required, which enable a true exchange between the individuals in Europe, just as between businesses and science and R&D. So only by significantly intensifying intra-European collaboration can that potential truly be flourishing and being used for the diversity of our continent and be fully utilized. So in that sense, I not only fully agree, but in the strongest sense support all activities that strive towards that goal.
Thank you. And Ronan, I just wanted to give you the opportunity also to comment on this issue before we
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Gail. And I also would like to express my appreciation to Commissioner Gabriel and to my colleagues here for this opportunity. I fully agree that, there really is, I think, a potential accelerator to us coming out of the pandemic here. Europe has been a leader in private-public partnerships over the last few decades. And just in my own company at Novartis, we are involved in 74 different innovative medicines initiative undertakings. And this has been a huge improvement for us in our ability to connect to the research infrastructure around Europe and in fact around the world. And it's something I think we can continue to accelerate. I hope that as people around the world see that the pandemic is going to be conquered by science, it will really rejuvenate the belief and faith in science and technology and the ability of people to work together. And I think that's what we should plan to look forward to.
I love that. I love that. Rejuvenate the ability for everyone to work together. I'm very, very happy with that phrase. I might steal that phrase from you if you don't mind. And on that topic then, maybe going back to Karen again, would you like to just talk a little bit about kind of the international dimension and the kind of the importance of kind of connecting out with the world?
Yeah, of course, this I do like the emphasis that the Commissioner has given on collaboration, international collaboration, also outside Europe. So I think this is very, very important. It's also a way to, research is also a medium for people to get to know each other and to get new inspiration from that, because research is not only a way to new results, it's also a way to new views of people, and this is extremely important for the future. So I think it's really nice that there's no walls around Europe, and that we can collaborate with the whole world in that sense, and also, of course, within the different European areas.
Matthias, would you like to also comment, to give you the opportunity to talk on about the international partnership stage?
Well, I couldn't agree more with what's already been said. In addition, I think that we should truly look at not only the international collaboration for the sake of itself, but only in terms of but also in terms of the international division of labor, and within this context, I think there's been very much attention being drawn over the last couple of months into becoming more self-sufficient, becoming more independent, becoming more autark. This is certainly a challenge for everyone who works in a very almost a global R&D environment with a very intense division of labor and an exchange. We're talking about open science and this truly globally. So it's not ideal to sketch ways out of this crisis in terms of going back to national or regional options, but rather to strengthen this international collaboration, knowing that we all have a healthy self-interest to collaborate, as Commissioner Gabriel already mentioned. So this is certainly in this global environment at the moment a very delicate topic, but I think nonetheless it's worth all our efforts to continue those collaborations.
Ronan, would you also like to add to this? Because obviously working for Novartis, you're in a multinational company. I'm sure that global partnerships must be a very important dimension of your work. So would you like to just sort of talk a little bit more about the way that you approach that and what you're looking for perhaps in partnerships, or your views on this, please?
Thank you, Gail. Yes, absolutely. No, both internally and externally, almost all our projects are international and often global. It's really because it works best when we have all of the talents from all over the world available to us. And I think that what we try to do is find, our partners who are interested in the same diseases and in the same conditions, and therefore, we have a very strong collaborative mindset from the beginning. I think in general, in nature, cooperation is common, altruism is very rare. And I think it's important to make sure that we, build the infrastructures and the incentives that support this approach, because at the end of the day, that's what will, I think, make everyone succeed. And for industrial partners like us, I think it's really the absence of barriers that's our key thing that we look for, right? So when there are things that make it more difficult to work in one place, we tend to go somewhere else. So, the idea of having, sort of level playing fields is really what we crave, because then, the resources can follow the creativity, which is, I think, how it should.
Can I just ask you a kind of supplementary question there, Ronan, which is that the Commissioner mentioned kind of values earlier, and I guess kind of, ethics, working with patients, that must be very different in different countries. I mean, how do you kind of navigate the different kind of values and the difficult ethical arrangements that you need to put in place or to work with in order to facilitate kind of global cooperation? Is that something that you consider strongly?
It's an interesting question, Gail. In general, actually, it's not as different as you would think. Most, at least in the medical field, really the ethics are fairly universal. And so that we have, I think, different cultures and different societies have different set points on where their comfort level is. But the general sort of risk-benefit assessment is actually very similar worldwide, and it allows us to work, I think, quite smoothly all over the globe. I think in Europe, it's an advantage because we do have such a sophisticated mechanism for working across national borders and across different disciplines. That really is an advantage in Europe, and it's something that we should nurture as we think about Horizon EU and how it goes forward.
Thank you. Commissioner, would you like to just maybe reflect on some of the points that the panel's made and to maybe respond to some of their points?
Well, I can only agree how important it's really to strengthen our international cooperation with our partners, and that's why for me that was so important, that we need to work together with them in order to be sure that when we talk about values and principles, we are looking at the same direction. There is no need to harmonize, to unify, but we need really to have reliable partners and to know what we are speaking speaking about, because we are talking here about ethical science, about intellectual property rights, and there is no fatality to modulate our engagement, but we need to have this solid base, because in that case, some of our main assets like open science, like our instruments, like the Horizon Europe program, that's really the base of our leadership, and that's my wish, that we have these open conversations, and that when we talk about having alliances, that will be a real alliance on principles and values. And we have already really some very encouraging signs. For the others, I can only repeat, we should not be naive, and there is just a need to look at the reality, and who else that science, research and innovation can really tell us what is the reality. So I think that here we have one of the strong elements in order to stay pragmatic, to know what we are doing together and how we are advancing in our own way. And I very much count on this, that together with the community, we'll find the best way really to continue to stay loyal to our principles, to what is our strength, to our openness to the world, but at the same time, yes, to be there for our talents, for our researchers, for our innovators, in order to show them that Europe is with them, not only in declarations, but in acts.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And now I'd like to wrap up with the kind of theme around COVID-19 specifically, and invite Karen, maybe if you just would like to just say a few words on, from you in your view as a head of the university, and what lessons have you learned throughout this pandemic, both in your role as being head of a university, but also in terms of the research and innovation strategies that you carry out?
Well, thank you for the question, Gail. This is what started as a kind of an intervention from day one, as you have to turn over the whole university and all the activities that you have. We have now come in a time where we look forward to the future. And of course, in the last months, some steps have been set, which will not be, we will not go back. So it's very important to consider and to look into the future and see how can our system, which has been working quite fine with the independent university research and collaboration with companies and the platform industry, was a kind of a level playing field. This is going to change for the future, and the question is how can we make that balanced and good working again for the future, and that holds for the combination public-private, but also working together with other countries which have different values. How the borders become softer as well. So it's not so easy to because the digital world is everywhere. So this is something we have to think about for the future. And maybe to speak for universities, they will look quite different over 20 years. And we are setting the footprint now. So yeah, I'd like to continue this discussion the next few years on that.
Karen, how has it been for sort of the staff, if you like, within the people that carry out all these things? What have you learned in terms of? Of course,
this has been. They have done a tremendous work. I mean, everyone has changed over a few days, just also for the benefit of our students, to make sure that that they could really that the education was still going on, and actually that worked quite well. And we are now actually, since it's now March, we're starting now the second year, so to speak, in COVID terms. So it has worked really well. I can tell you that this is really at the cost of their well-being. To some extent, I mean, they have worked really serious, very hard. So we do as a university whatever we can to support them. But now for this year, we will really have to make this new life more sustainable. And that's why now we are thinking about these new conditions, new, how are we going to organize for a digital world? And just one thing, this doesn't mean not at all that education will be digital from now on. It means that we also have to reinvent what we have to do face to face. And so University of Amsterdam is a campus university. We want to stay a campus university. If things can be done digitally for the further future, we will do that. But the real experience of studying and of doing research is the just face-to-face connection. And we will have to organize that. So we are confronted now with a double transition. One is the digitalization, and one is a new face-to-face campus university.
It reminds me, I think, as well, in terms of the emphasis that we have to think about with mental health issues and looking after our students, looking after our staff, looking after the kind of the people who do all this great work. You know, it's not just robots or abstract people who just carry on regardless. You know, we are all doing real jobs, aren't we?
And no matter how we have been succeeding in keeping education going, our students are really at the end. It's very hard. They also for them, it's the studying goes together with the contacts and with the discussions, and they cannot do this now. So also this in a new education frame is something in a campus university that we have to reinvent. And mental health is, we do whatever we can to organize the contacts which are still possible, and to also make sure that we really care about what's going on.
Thank you. And Matthias, would you like to just talk about as well what you think are the kind of main lessons learned from COVID and how that's kind of impacted you and the Fraunhofer and the way that you're viewing going forward?
Certainly. Well, I'd say that we at Fraunhofer and at RTOs in general, we probably face a kind of similar set of challenges than universities. Most of our leading staff is also university professors and so on. But looking at the new reality, the facts that COVID-19 established for us, really gave rise to a couple of questions that we tried to answer at Fraunhofer. First and foremost, well, how can we overcome this immediate acute crisis as quickly as possible while minimizing the damage to human beings, to our staff, to the economy, to our society? Secondly, how can we achieve to a greater extent technological sovereignty? The crisis has shown that we, in order to develop our own technologies, and we need a more thorough understanding in several technological fields that we have not established yet, or that we have already lost. So that does by no means imply comprehensive technological self-sufficiency, but it really strives towards the goal of ensuring sufficient options in times of crisis. And we want to help in developing and maintaining those capabilities and resources. And it's ultimately, I think, a necessary condition for the ambitious development of key innovations, and it's thereby a necessity for, well, probably for our more substantial and independent economic and political understanding and options for action. And then the third part that really intrigued us was how to maintain really this European and international perspective. But I think we already discussed that thoroughly. And above all, really, how can science, how can research and development contribute, our core business, research and development, truly contribute to solving those issues?
Thank you. And Ronan, I'd like to ask the same question to you.
Thank you. I'd like to reflect on both one internal and one external facet of what's happened in the last year. So Novartis doesn't have vaccines programs, but we do have a lot of molecules for modulating the immune system. So we focused on patients in intensive care, patients in hospital and oxygen, because there's worry about the overactivity of the immune system causing them harm. And in the April and May, we started 5 different clinical trials for COVID-19 treatment, and we got from a blank piece of paper to first patient treated in 6 weeks on those trials. The normal time is 9 months. Now, that tells you that things can be done in a crisis that we aren't usually doing. So what can we do to, harness that in the future? Part of that is internal. Our people work on many projects, and these folks work only on this one project. Part of it is external. The interrelationship with health authorities, with regulators, with ethics committees, and so on. Everyone was motivated to move ahead. And this is something that I think we would like to see how we can kind of break down some barriers that may have grown up over the years as ways of ensuring quality, and all for good reasons, but maybe they've gotten to a point that that's beyond the productive. On the internal side, as you've said, as others have said, we really do have people trying to do this under very difficult conditions sometimes, right? Working from home, dealing with sick family members and so on. And it's really been instructive to see how much can be done remotely, right? We probably accelerated by 10 or 15 years the willingness of people to work remotely with each other. And I think that's something that we also need to learn how to balance in the future, because we do want people to work together. As Karen said, in a campus setting, we also have campuses around the world. And I think the advantage of those interactions that happen at the coffee machine or at the water fountain, you can't do that easily from home. But at the same time, we learned that, we can let people find their work-life balance according to what's right for them. And we anticipate in the future that people will have a much more flexible work capacity at a place like Novartis, where they will choose on a day-to-day basis. Are they coming into the office? Are they working from home? What are their responsibilities, and what's the best way to meet them? And to find a way to give people that flexibility, I think, will ensure that we have a happier and hopefully saner workforce in the future as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you. We just have 2 or 3 minutes left. So I think it's sort of time for sort of final reflections time. Just give you each a minute just to give your final words to the audience out there who are listening. Karen, can I start with you?
Yeah, thank you. I think we got the shock that COVID has brought has, in a sense, also made us thinking more seriously about the future. I think that's a good thing. With all the things that have been said, I would like to add one thing to that. We have learned a lot about communication in this type of crises, and we have seen the role of science in that. And I think this is also something as a scientific community which we have to elaborate on. How can we, from the independent knowledge part, I would say, how can we increase our communication and make sure that instead of all fake news or opinions, we can also bring independent views, which are maybe not complete, but at least are important to discuss in the world. So this is one that definitely also in a future digitalized world, we have to foster.
Yes, I love this subject, communicating to the public. It's highly complex, highly difficult, and highly important. So I'm definitely with you there, Karen. Matthias, would you like to just say a few words as well, maybe in agreement or any other things reflections that you have?
Yes, certainly. Well, from my point of view, we should really use science, research and development as a key resource to really actively address all the goals that have been established and discussed today of a sustainable and digital transformation in the post-crisis recovery. Research results and all the solutions in the fields of climate protection, of digital transformation, sustainable value creation in general, they need to be implemented, and they need to be implemented now and on a large scale to make all of us fit for the future. And a European resilience strategy would come in handy to this end, and that would need to address priorities such as health, energy, mobility for the people, and whose results are implemented throughout Europe to truly make an important contribution. Thanks.
Thank you. And just very briefly, we're really running out of time here. So just very briefly, if there's anything burning that you'd like to add, now's your chance.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, pharmaceutical research is a game with a 90% failure rate, which means it has to be a game for optimists. I think this is really a time for optimism. We're going to have huge challenges around climate change, around biology, around all sorts of things around our populations. But the capacity of science and technology to find solutions is something we should never underestimate. I think we can do it.
Perfect. And we'll end on that optimistic note. And thank you, all of you, so much for giving us your thoughts, your reflections, and your discussion and your time today. I certainly appreciate it. The whole of Science Business appreciates it, and I'm sure the audience does too. So thank you so much, and have a great day.